By the time I arrived on the train, it was about 9 o'clock, and the moon was coming out of this clear, starry sky over the houses opposite of the station entrance. But the air was deadly cold, and the wind was like a flat blade of ice on my cheeks. Having never been to Bath before, I took directions from a porter to some cheap local lodgings, a pub called the Bell and Dragon, and made my way briskly down the street, for briskness was the number one common characteristic of all successful businessmen. Like those big shots high up at head office. They're always so amazingly brisk. As I studied the once swanky facades of the passing houses, now cracked and blotchy from neglect, all of a sudden, in a downstairs window, I caught sight of a printed notice propped up against the glass. It said bed and breakfast. I stopped walking and moved a bit closer. There is a vase of yellow chrysanthemums standing just underneath the notice that looked wonderful beside the green velvety curtains. I went right up and peered through the glass. Well, there's a nice fire burning in the hearth. Look, a pretty little dachshund curled up in front of it. Pleasant enough furniture, and a large parrot in the cage back there. Animals are usually a good sign in this sort of place. All in all, it looked more comfortable than the Bell and Dragon. Though on the other hand, a pub would be more congenial than a boarding house. Perhaps then I shall walk on and take a look before making up my mind. I turned to go, and now a queer thing happened to me. All at once, my eye was caught and held in the most peculiar manner by a small notice that was there. Bed and breakfast. It said bed and breakfast. Bed and breakfast. Each word was like a large black eye staring at me through the glass, holding me and compelling me. The next thing I knew, I was actually climbing up the steps and reaching for the bell. The woman popped up so fast, she was like a jack-in-the-box. It made me jump.
Oh, please, come in, come in.
The desire to follow after her into that house was extraordinarily strong. I saw the notice in the window.
Yes, I know.
I was wondering about a room.
It's all ready for you, my dear.
I was on the way to the Bell and Dragon, but the notice in your window just happened to catch my eye.
My dear boy, why don't you come in out of the cold?
How much do you charge?
5 and 6 pence a night, including breakfast.
Fantastically cheap.
If that's too much, then perhaps I can reduce it a tiny bit. It would be 6 pence left without the egg for breakfast.
Oh, 5 and 6 pence is fine. I should like it very much to stay here.
I knew you would. Do come in. Let me help you with your coat. I'm afraid we have the house all to ourselves. It isn't very often that I have the pleasure of taking a little visitor into my little nest.
I should have thought you'd be simply swamped with applicants.
Oh, I am, my dear, I am. Of course I am. But the trouble is, I'm inclined to be just a teeny weeny bit choosy, if you see what I mean.
Ah, yes.
But I'm always ready. Everything is always ready, day and night, just on the off chance that an acceptable young gentleman will come along. And it is such a pleasure, my dear, such a very great pleasure, when now and again I open up the door and I see someone standing there who's just exactly right, like you. Now, the second floor is mine, and this one's all yours. Here's your room. I do hope you'll like it. The morning sun comes right through the window, Mr. Perkins. It is Mr. Perkins, isn't it?
No, it's Weaver.
Mr. Weaver. How nice. I put a bottle of water between the sheets to air them out, Mr. Weaver. It's such a comfort to have a hot water bottle in a strange bed with clean sheets. Do you agree? And you may light the gas fire if any time you feel chilly.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much.
I'm so glad you appeared. I was beginning to get worried.
That's all right. You mustn't worry about me.
Very well then, I'll leave you so that you can unpack. But before you go to bed, would you be kind enough to pop in the sitting room on the ground floor and sign the book? Everyone has to do that because it's the law of the land. And we don't want to go breaking any laws at this stage in the proceedings, do we?
Oh, she's slightly off her rocker, but at this price, what of it? After all, she's not only harmless, but quite obviously a kind and generous soul. Probably just lost a son in the war, I suppose. So a few minutes later, I trotted downstairs to the living room. The landlady wasn't there, but the fire was glowing warm in the hearth, and the little dachshund was sleeping soundly in front of it. I found the guest book lying open on the piano, so I took out my pen and wrote my name and address. There were only 2 other entries above mine on the page, and as one always does with guest books, I started to read them. That's funny. This name, Christopher Mulholland, it rings a bell. Now, where on earth have I heard such a rather unusual name before? Now that I think of it, the second name has something familiar about it as well. Gregory Temple, Christopher Mulholland.
Such charming boys.
They sound somehow familiar.
They do? How interesting.
I'm almost positive I heard those names before somewhere. Isn't that odd? Maybe it was in the newspapers. They weren't famous in any way, were they?
Famous, so no. I don't think they were famous, but they're both incredibly handsome, both of them. Just exactly like you, my dear.
Look here, the last entry is over 2 years old.
Dear me, never would have thought it. How time does fly away from us, doesn't it, Mr. Wilkins?
It's Weaver.
Of course it is. How silly of me. I do apologize. Now, dear, come over here and sit beside me. And I'll give you a nice cup of tea and a ginger biscuit before you go to bed.
Oh, you really shouldn't bother. I didn't mean you to do anything like that. I'm almost positive I read it in the newspapers. I'll think of it in a second. I'm sure I will. Now, wait a minute. Wait just a minute. Christopher Mulholland? Wasn't that name of the Eton schoolboy who was on a walking tour through the West Country and...
Milk and sugar?
Yes, please. And then all of a sudden, they...
Eton schoolboy. Oh, no, my dear. That can't possibly be right, because my Mr. Mulholland was certainly not an Eton schoolboy when he came to me. He was a Cambridge undergraduate. Come over here and sit next to me and warm yourself in front of this lovely fire. Come on, your tea's all ready for you. There we are. How nice and cozy this is, isn't it?
As we sipped our tea in silence, I knew she was looking at me. Her body was half turned towards me, and I could feel her resting eyes on my face, watching over the rim of her teacup.
Ah, Mr. Mulholland was a great one for his tea. Never in my life have I seen anyone drink as much tea as dear sweet Mr. Mulholland.
Oh, I suppose he left fairly recently.
Left? My dear boy, he never left. He's still here. Mr. Temple is also here. They're on the 4th floor, both of them together. How old are you, my dear?
17.
17? Oh, it's the perfect age. Mr. Mulholland was also 17, but I think he was a trifle shorter than you were, and his teeth weren't quite so white. You have the most beautiful teeth, Mr. Weaver. Do you know that?
They're not as good as they look. They've got simply masses of fillings in them at the back.
Mr. Temple, of course, was a little older. He was actually 8, and yet never would have guessed it if he hadn't told me. Never in my whole life. There wasn't a blemish on his body.
A what?
His skin was just like a baby's.
parrot in the corner. You know something? It had me completely fooled when I first saw it through the window. I could have sworn it was alive.
Alas, no longer.
It's most terribly clever the way it's been done. It doesn't look the least bit dead. Who did it?
I did.
You did?
Of course. Have you met my little Basil as well?
I realized the dachshund had been just as silent and motionless as the parrot. I put out a hand and touched it gently on the back. It was hard and cold, and when I pushed the hair to one side, I could see the grayish black skin underneath, perfectly preserved. Good gracious me, how absolutely fascinating. It must be awfully difficult to do such a thing.
Not in the least. I always stuff all my little pets when they pass away. Will you have another cup of tea?
Oh, no, thank you. The tea tasted faintly of bitter almonds, and I didn't care much of it.
You did sign the guest book, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
That's good, because later on, if I happen to forget what you're called, then I can always come here and look it up. I still do that almost every day with Mr. Mulholland and Mr.
Temple? Gregory Temple? Excuse my asking, but haven't there been any other guests here except them in the last 2 or 3 years?
No, my dear. Only you.
I love it, Lindsay. Yes. Okay. Oh, parents, if you want to raise your hands and give them some love, let me know. But great job, Sumoni. Lindsay, give yourself a bow. And Sumoni, give yourself a bow. That was amazing. Good job, girls. Charlotte, give them a bow. Oh, hold on. Carrie wants to say.
Yay! Nice job, you two. Perfect duo.
Thank you, Carrie, for giving them.
There's Miss Hogelak. Hi, thank you for watching the girls.
Good job, girls. That was awesome.
Thank you, Miss Hogel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing up. We love English and theater teachers showing up.
Yeah, of course. Your backdrop was perfect too, with the little parrot in the corner. And then Sumoni, when you came in from outside on the street into the Landlady's bed and breakfast, was so good.
Thank you so much. Hey, and good luck teaching this fall. You know,
Thank
little virtual studio action. Let's go. These kids are doing it.
you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for showing up.
Oh, there's Lindsay's grandma wants to say something.